I always thought I had the kind of life people envied. A house in the suburbs, not too big, not too small, with a porch that creaked just enough to sound welcoming. A wife, Carol, who still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, even after 30 years. Two grown kids who called on Sundays, out there living their own stories. From the outside, it was the picture of stability, the kind of life you're supposed to want. My days followed a rhythm so steady it was almost meditative. Up at 6, coffee black, the same chipped mug I'd used for a decade. The drive to work, the same route, the same worn spot on the steering wheel where my thumb rested. The office, the same jokes with the same guys, the same paperwork that never really changed. Home by 6:30. Dinner, usually quiet unless Carol had something to say about the neighbors or the grandkids. Then TV, or a book, or sometimes just sitting in the garage with the door up, listening to the crickets. People saw me as solid, reliable, the kind of man who didn't complain, didn't cause trouble, and I wasn't unhappy, not exactly. But there were moments, small and weightless as dust motes in sunlight, when I'd catch myself staring at nothing and realize I was waiting. For what? I didn't know. That night, the fight didn't even feel like a fight at first. Just another conversation that didn't land right. Carol had asked me, again, why I never wanted to travel anymore. "We've got the savings," she said. "We're not getting any younger." I shrugged. Just don't see the point. It wasn't the answer she wanted. Her face did that thing, the slight tightening around the eyes like she was trying to solve a puzzle she'd been staring at for years. "You used to love going places," she said softly. I didn't reply. What could I say? That the idea of packing a bag, of stepping onto a plane, of being somewhere new, felt exhausting in a way I couldn't explain? That the thought of trying to want something, really want it, made my chest ache? The silence stretched. Then, in a voice so quiet it barely ruffled the air, she said, "I don't know how to reach you anymore." It wasn't anger, it was worse. It was resignation. I went to bed early, lay there in the dark, listening to her moving around downstairs, the distant clink of dishes, the hum of the TV. The house felt too big suddenly, the walls too thin. And for the first time in a long time, I wondered if the life everyone thought was perfect was just a suit I'd worn so long I'd forgotten how to take it off. Somewhere around midnight, I got up, grabbed my pillow, and walked to the couch, not because she'd asked me to, because I didn't know where else to go. I didn't intend to end up at my sister-in-law's house. It just happened. The way things do when you're driving with no destination, just the hum of the engine and the weight of silence pressing in. Sarah and Dave lived 20 minutes away, close enough to be convenient, far enough to feel like an escape. I told myself I just needed a place to clear my head, a neutral couch where I wouldn't have to explain the tightness in my chest. Sarah opened the door in sweatpants, her reading glasses perched on her head. She took one look at me, pillow under my arm, no bag, the exhaustion playing on my face, and didn't ask questions, just stepped aside. "Dave's out of town," she said. "Couch is yours if you want it." I should have called Carol. I knew that. But the thought of her voice, the careful way she'd say okay, like she was bracing for another disappointment, made my throat close up. So I stayed quiet. Sarah handed me a beer, the same cheap kind we'd drunk in college, and for a moment it was easy to pretend nothing had changed, that we were still those reckless kids who stayed up too late laughing about nothing. But then she glanced at my wedding ring, then away, and the air shifted. "You two gonna be all right?" she asked. I shrugged. "Dunno." She smirked, nervous habit, and pulled out her phone. "Well, let's give her something to really be mad about." Before I could react, she typed something and hit send. "A joke," she said, just to rattle Carol. I didn't think much of it. Not until later, when I was lying on their couch staring at the ceiling and my phone buzzed. A text from Carol. Just 3 words. "I see." No anger, no questions, just that. I sat up, suddenly cold. Sarah's phone lit up across the room. Carol had replied to her too. I didn't ask to see it, didn't need to. The way Sarah's smile faltered told me everything. It wasn't about the prank. It was about all the things we didn't say. The years of quiet distance, the way Carol and I had become experts at missing each other in the same house. Sarah's stupid text had just ripped the curtain back. I thought about driving home right then, but I didn't. Instead, I lay back down, listening to the clock tick in the dark, wondering when exactly I'd become a stranger in my own life. And worse, wondering if I even wanted to find my way back. Morning light came too soon through Sarah's living room blinds, painting stripes across the couch where I'd barely slept. My phone sat silent on the coffee table. No missed calls, no frantic texts, just that last message from Carol. I see. 2 words that somehow held the weight of 30 years. Sarah shuffled into the kitchen before I could say anything, the smell of coffee brewing between us like a peace offering. She didn't mention the text, just handed me a mug, the same chipped Ohio State one they'd had since Dave's college days, and said, "You look like hell." I should have laughed. That's what the old me would have done. But my reflection in the microwave door caught me off guard. The gray stubble, the tired eyes, the way my shoulders slumped like they'd been carrying something heavy for miles. When did I start looking like my father? The house was too quiet without Dave's morning news blaring. Sarah scrolled through her phone, the glow lighting her face in the dim kitchen. Then she froze. A sharp inhale. "Oh, shit," she muttered, turning the screen toward me. Carol's Facebook post showed our wedding photo, the one from the mantle, with the caption, "Sometimes love means knowing when to let go." Posted 3 hours ago. Liked by her sister, her book club friends, our daughter. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. This wasn't us. We didn't air our problems online. We let them simmer behind closed doors, in stiff goodnights and half-finished conversations. That photo, my younger self grinning like I had life figured out, felt like a punch. Sarah's hand hovered over mine. "She's just hurt. She doesn't mean—" I stood so fast the chair screeched. "I need to go home." But driving through our neighborhood, past the manicured lawns and minivans, I realized I didn't recognize my own hands on the wheel. They looked like a stranger's, veiny, age-spotted, gripping too tight. The garage door opener clicked like always, but the sound set my teeth on edge. Carol's car was gone. The house smelled of lemon cleaner and emptiness. On the kitchen counter, her favorite mug sat washed and upside down on a towel, like she'd left in a hurry but still took time to tidy up. That was Carol. Always careful, even in anger. Upstairs, our bed was made military tight the way she liked it, but her nightstand drawer hung slightly open. Inside, her grandmother's ring, the one she never took off, gleamed in its velvet box. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under me the same way it had for decades. The digital clock on her side blinked 12:00. Power must have gone out last night. Somewhere in the house, a pipe groaned, a normal sound. A sound I'd heard 1,000 times, but this time it sounded like the house itself was sighing. I reached for my phone, thumb hovering over Carol's name. But what would I say? That I was sorry? That I didn't know how we got here? That maybe part of me had been waiting for this rupture all along? Outside, a car door slammed. I held my breath. It was just the neighbors. The clock kept blinking. The house held its breath with me as I wandered from room to room, each step echoing like a trespass. I found myself in the laundry room, fingers brushing against a pile of Carol's clothes, still warm from the dryer, folded neatly but left behind. A single sock had fallen to the floor, and I stared at it, absurdly fixated, as if it held some answer. I picked it up, thin, worn at the heel. She'd had these socks for years. I knew because I'd bought them for her, one of those thoughtless, last-minute Christmas gifts from the drugstore. She'd laughed and worn them anyway. That was Carol, practical, uncomplaining. Now standing there with that sock in my hand, it struck me how much of our life together had been like this. Small, quiet acts of endurance, not grand betrayals or explosive fights, just the slow wearing down of something that had once been whole. I climbed the stairs to our daughter's old room, the guest room now, though neither of us ever said it out loud. The bed was made with military precision, the same way Carol had done when Lisa still lived here. A layer of dust coated the dresser. I drew a line through it with my finger, then wiped my hand on my jeans, ashamed of my own carelessness. The closet door was slightly ajar. Inside, stacked in the corner, were 3 cardboard boxes labeled in Carol's neat handwriting. Memories. I knelt, my knees cracking, and lifted the lid of the top one. Photos. Dozens of them, loose and jumbled. Our wedding, Lisa's graduation, that vacation to Maine we'd taken 15 years ago, back when we still bothered to plan trips together. I sifted through them, the colors faded, the edges curled. At the bottom of the box I found a manila envelope. Inside were letters. My letters. The ones I'd written to Carol when we were dating, back when I was young enough to believe words could bridge any distance. I unfolded one, the paper brittle with age, and read my own clumsy declarations of love. I can't wait to build a life with you, I'd written. Every day with you feels like a gift. My throat tightened. When was the last time I'd said anything like that to her? When had I stopped trying? A car pulled into the driveway. I froze, listening to the engine cut off, the door slam. Footsteps on the porch. The key turned in the lock. I should have gone downstairs. Should have met her at the door, letters in hand, something, anything, to prove I remembered the man who'd written them. But I didn't. I stayed where I was, crouched on the floor of a room that wasn't mine anymore, holding evidence of a love I'd let gather dust. Downstairs, the front door opened, then closed. Silence. Had she come back? Or had she only returned to collect the rest of her things? I realized with a dull ache that I didn't know. And worse, I wasn't sure which possibility scared me more. The creak of the floorboards downstairs stopped me cold. Every muscle tensed, waiting for Carol's voice to call up, for the familiar rhythm of her footsteps on the stairs. But there was only silence, heavy and thick like the air before a storm. I should have gone down, should have faced whatever waited for me. Instead, I found myself moving toward the window, the old wood frame sticking as I pushed it up just enough to slip through. The roof of the back porch was slick with morning dew, but I didn't hesitate. My body remembered this escape route from years ago, when Lisa was a teenager and I'd sneak out here to smoke, pretending I still had secrets worth keeping. The drop to the lawn jarred my knees. I paused, listening, but the house remained silent behind me. My truck keys dug into my thigh as I jogged toward the driveway, half expecting Carol to appear in the doorway, arms crossed, her disappointment sharper than any words. But the only movement was the neighbor's cat slinking through the hydrangeas. I drove without thinking, the streets blurring into highways, then county roads. The radio played some old Springsteen song about getting out while you're young, and I almost laughed. 57 years old, and here I was, running like a kid with his hand caught in the cookie jar. By noon, I found myself at Miller's Pond, the fishing spot my dad took me to when I was too young to understand why he needed the quiet. The water was still high from spring rains, the dock swaying slightly under my weight as I sat at the end, legs dangling. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Sarah, probably. Or maybe Lisa calling to ask what the hell her mother's Facebook post meant. I didn't check. The tackle box under the dock's bench was right where the old man kept it. I pried it open, the rusted hinges groaning. Inside, along with the lures and line, was a flask, Dad's secret. I unscrewed the cap and sniffed. Whiskey, cheap and sharp, the smell instantly transporting me to 100 childhood mornings when he'd come back from fishing with glassy eyes and rough hands. I took a swig. The burn felt like punishment. A blue heron landed at the far edge of the pond, still as a statue. I watched it, remembering how Carol loved birds, how she'd keep binoculars by the kitchen window to watch the finches at the feeder. Had I ever bought her a new pair when the old ones broke? The flask was half empty when I noticed the car pulling into the gravel lot. Not Carol's sedan. A pickup. Dave's, I realized as it got closer. He didn't wave as he walked toward the dock, just sat down beside me and took the flask from my hands. We passed it back and forth in silence. the heron watching us with what felt like judgment. You know, Dave finally said, staring at the water. Sarah's worried sick. Carol, too, though she'd never admit it. I nodded, waiting for the anger, the lecture, but Dave just sighed and rubbed his beard. Hell, I don't blame you for running. Sometimes I think about it, too. The admission hung between us, raw and honest in a way nothing had been in years. The heron spread its wings and lifted off, sending ripples across the pond. I thought about Carol, alone in our house with her folded laundry and empty ring finger. Thought about the letters in that box, the promises I'd made and broken without even noticing. Dave handed me the flask. You gonna go back? The whiskey tasted like regret. I didn't answer. Dave dropped me back at Sarah's house just after sunset. The whiskey haze had lifted, leaving behind a dull throb behind my eyes and a metallic taste of shame in my mouth. Sarah's porch light was on, casting long shadows across the driveway. I could see her silhouette through the kitchen window, washing dishes with the same methodical precision Carol used. She didn't turn around when I came in, just kept scrubbing a coffee cup that was already clean. The silence stretched between us, filled only with the squeak of porcelain against her wedding ring. I talked to Carol, she finally said. The cup clinked as she set it down too hard. I leaned against the counter, suddenly aware of how out of place I looked in this tidy kitchen, my clothes rumpled, 2 days of stubble scratching my neck. The refrigerator hummed, the familiar sound making my chest ache for my own kitchen, for the normalcy I'd taken for granted. Sarah turned then, her hands dripping soapy water onto the linoleum. There were dark circles under her eyes I hadn't noticed before. She thinks you're having an affair. With me. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh, but the sound died in my throat when I saw Sarah's face. This wasn't a joke. This was the crack in the dam, the thing that explained Carol's Facebook post, the abandoned ring, the terrible silence in our house. Sarah wiped her hands on a dish towel, the one with the embroidered roosters Carol had given her last Christmas. I tried to tell her it was just a stupid text, that nothing happened. She shook her head. But it's not really about that, is it? I stared at the roosters on the towel, their beady eyes mocking me. Of course it wasn't about the text. It was about 30 years of small neglects, of missed opportunities to say, I love you, of choosing silence over connection. It was about becoming my father, disappearing into bottles and fishing trips rather than facing the hard work of staying present. Sarah reached into the cabinet and pulled out 2 glasses, then a bottle of bourbon I recognized, the expensive stuff Dave saved for special occasions. She poured 2 fingers in each glass and pushed one toward me. She still loves you, Sarah said, not meeting my eyes. But love isn't always enough, is it? The bourbon burned going down, but not enough to distract from the truth settling in my bones. I thought about Carol's hands folding laundry that would never be worn, about the wedding photo she'd posted online like a eulogy, about the letters in that box upstairs, all those promises written in a younger man's hand. Outside, a car door slammed. Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes darting to the front window. Neither of us moved, listening to footsteps on the walkway. The doorbell rang. Sarah exhaled sharply. That'll be Carol. My fingers tightened around the glass. This was it, the reckoning I'd been avoiding for years. The question wasn't whether I'd answer the door. The question was whether I remembered how to be the man who wrote those letters. The doorbell echoed through Sarah's house like a gunshot. My hand shook, not from the bourbon, but from the weight of all the words I'd never said. Sarah didn't move. She just looked at me, her eyes saying what we both knew. This is your mess. You answer it. The walk to the door took a lifetime. Each step carried me further from the man I'd become, the one who hid, who let silence fester, and closer to the one I used to be, or maybe the one I still could be. The hardwood floor creaked under my weight, the same way it had in our first apartment, back when Carol would laugh and say the ghosts were keeping us company. I opened the door. Carol stood there, her face bare of makeup, her hair pulled back in a way I hadn't seen since Lisa was born. She looked older, tired, beautiful. In her hands was the manila envelope of letters, The edges crumpled where she'd gripped them too tight. We stared at each other, the years stretching between us, not as distance, but as something softer, a bridge, a chance. I forgot, she said quietly, her voice cracking on the words. I forgot how you used to write about the way I took my coffee, how you noticed. The ache in my chest was unbearable. All those mornings I'd poured her cup without looking up, all the times I'd stopped seeing her. She held out the envelope. I need to know if that man still exists. The truth hit me like a tide. Love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice made every day in 1,000 small ways. I took the letters, my fingers brushing hers, and felt the callus on her thumb, the one from gardening, from all the things she'd tended without me. He's here, I said. I'm here. Carol exhaled, a shuddering breath that carried 30 years of loneliness. Then she stepped forward, her forehead resting against my chest, and I wrapped my arms around her, the letters pressed between us. We stood like that for a long time, the porch light humming above us, the night air cool on our skin. Somewhere inside, Sarah turned off the kitchen light, and for the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged.